Hello and welcome. The political turmoil in Egypt has now assumed a violent incarnation. The country's leading cleric has warned of civil war. More than 50 supporters of the ousted President Mohamed Morsi have been killed in a confrontation outside the barracks in Cairo, where it's believed Mr. Morsi is being held after last week's coup. His party, the Muslim Brotherhood, accuses the army of a massacre, but the military say some armed groups attacked the area outside the barracks. Our Middle East correspondent Ali Makboul reports.
It's plunged families into grief and Egypt even further into crisis. While accounts of what happened differ, what we do know is dozens of supporters of the deposed president, Mohamed Morsi, have been left dead. Mobile phone footage appears to show police and soldiers firing at a crowd. It's outside the building where many believe the army's detaining the former president, and it's where, at dawn, pro-Morsi demonstrators were staging a sit-in. Victims were first taken to a field clinic close to the site.
This is my documentation. Policemen opened the gunshot on them without any objection from them, actually. And the military forces was observing, just observing. They did nothing.
In chaotic scenes, the dead and the hundreds of wounded were then moved to hospitals that could barely cope. Well, this hospital close to the scene is filled with casualties like this, with gunshot wounds, even spilling out here into the corridor. Now, emotions are running very high indeed, but everyone we've spoken to insists that the firing was unprovoked. It's not the way Egypt's dangerous rifts are going to be healed.
My brother, this morning, we got a call that told us that he was shot. I came here. Turns out that he was shot on the left side of his chest. Absolutely outraged. This was a totally peaceful sit-in.
But the military insists its soldiers were shot at first and that an armed group had tried to infiltrate their compound. Egyptian state TV has been broadcasting video apparently showing some of the demonstrators firing weapons. At the spot where the killings took place, there remains a standoff between soldiers and supporters of Mohamed Morsi. The army's warned them to leave. Muslim Brotherhood supporters, though, have gone from the shock of losing their leaders to utter fury at what's happened since. Their party has called for an uprising. The potential for more violence is clear, and today's events have made it even harder to see a way out of Egypt's descent into civil conflict.
That report was by Aleem Makboul, and indeed we can go live now to get an update from Aleem in Cairo. Aleem, so just give us an update on the state of affairs since you filed that report. What is going on now?
Well, right here you can see a huge number of Muslim Brotherhood supporters of the deposed President Mohamed Morsi gathered here. I mean, they are going back in almost, as far as I can see, in almost every direction here, very close to the spot where those killings took place. Over 50 people killed and more than 400 injured. It's a very emotionally charged crowd here. You can hear some of the speeches going on right now. They've been praying, offering prayers for those who died. And some of them down there have been telling us that they are deciding whether tonight is going to be another night of peace or whether it's going to be a night of revenge. They're very upset that the army has not expressed regret for what happened, only issued more warnings. And in turn, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood has called for an uprising, an intifada. So the likelihood of more violence, I'd have to say, is very high.
OK, Aleem, thanks very much indeed. Aleem Makboul there bringing us the latest from Cairo. Well, I've been joined here in the studio by Azzam Tamimi. He's a writer on Islamic movements, and he is, in fact, a friend of Mohamed Morsi. Indeed, you count a lot of the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt amongst your friends and acquaintances, Azzam Tamimi. So do you think now that the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt is basically in battle, in a fight with the military?
Well, this is not about the Muslim Brotherhood. This is about a huge segment of the Egyptian population who feel betrayed, who feel that their rights have been violated. They elected a president, and that president was ousted by the army under a variety of pretexts that they don't accept or believe.
But I mean, just in answer to my question now, where we see, you know, what's going on now, can you say that what's going on in Egypt is basically a battle for power between the Brotherhood and the military?
You see, the Brotherhood and their allies of Islamists believe that the army and its allies in Egypt are after them. So if they lose this, if they give up, if they go home and do not insist on the restoration of legitimacy, we will have another era of Nasser, of Mubarak's regime, sending people to prison, torturing them and persecuting them.
The answer is yes, then, it would seem like. But what is the strength of the Islamists in Egypt? Because we know, obviously, the military are obviously very well armed. They claim that there are armed supporters amongst the Islamists.
Well, there's no evidence so far that the Islamists have used any violence throughout. The army, of course, is accusing them in order to justify the massacre that was perpetrated today. But if it is a question of strength, of course, there are different sources of strength on both sides. On the side of the army is allied with the secularists, with the leftists, with the Nasserists, with the liberals, and with the remnants of the Mubarak regime, supported by at least two main Arab Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. And it also has the tacit support of the West, because the West has refused to recognize this as a coup.
Well, I mean, right up until Mohamed Morsi's removal, as you know, the Americans were backing him, saying this guy was democratically elected. But just looking at the Islamists in Egypt, they are divided. You have the Noor Party, an Islamist party, which at first welcomed the removal of Mohamed Morsi, said it was going to cooperate with the interim administration. Now it's changed its mind, but nevertheless, the camp is divided in Egypt.
Well, Noor changing its mind is good news for the Morsi camp, because that delegitimizes the coup.
Yeah, but I'm using it as an example of the fact that the Islamists in Egypt don't all speak with one voice, do they? They are divided.
But they are more united than ever before, by the way, because the Muslim Brotherhood managed to ally around them, managed to bring together a huge alliance of Islamists, except for the Noor party, which is a very marginal party, though it was very useful.
An influential one.
Not really influential, but very useful for the coup perpetrators, because it provided them with legitimacy.
Okay, but just looking at the Muslim Brotherhood still, though, it was given a year to govern it was governed for a year in Egypt at least, and it saw its popularity really plummet. And for some people, that represented failure.
That's not an acceptable argument. How can you measure sympathy and support? We had a ballot, people elected, and President Morsi was urging people to go to elect a parliament, and that should have happened.
Well, you know that his critics say that he was running a kind of theocratic authoritarianism. That's what his critics say, and we accept, as you say, that he won, but nevertheless there are many people who felt disenfranchised by the Muslim Brotherhood. So where do we go from here? We have Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayyib, the leader of Al-Azhar, the most influential cleric in Egypt, saying, look, there could be a civil war. He says he's going to go into seclusion until the violence ends. Could his voice carry any influence?
Well, he is to blame for this. He is partly to blame for this because he joined the coup perpetrators. He provided them with legitimacy.
I'm sure you can't say that he's responsible for the violence, but I mean,
I'm not talking about violence. Yeah. I'm talking about this entire process of ousting a democratically elected president. People who joined the army in doing this provided the army with legitimacy.
But just going on, I don't want to redo last week's events again, but just very quickly.
I wasn't here last week.
Well, yeah, you want to catch up a bit, but where do we go from here? I mean, is he right? Could the country descend into civil war?
Well, we have to return to legitimacy. We have to return to the constitution. Bring back President Morsi. He's an elected president, and let's proceed with electing a parliament.
All right, Azzam Tamimi, a writer on Islamic movements and a friend of Mohamed Morsi. And by the way, you've not managed to have any contact with him, I suppose?
No, not now, no.
Any idea?
We don't know where he is.
And you don't know where he is?
He's held by the army somewhere. Some people suspect it's the place where the massacre took place this morning.
Which is at the headquarters of the Republican Guard in Cairo. All right, thank you.